Is it possible to fully recover after a catastrophic loss and go forward and live an abundant life full of meaning and purpose? What part do we play and what part does God play in the healing process? Today I have the fun and privilege of talking with a friend of mine, Paul Young, who is the author of The Shack and Crossroads and a number of other books known around the world. In 2006, I think, when The Shack came out, that book made a big splash internationally, and it has sold millions of copies around the world. And one of the things that Paul is so strong in is talking about the pain of loss and the process of transformation coming out of those painful losses. And we're going to talk a little bit today about life and death and God and transformation and how all of those things fit together. Paul, thank you so much for being with us today and taking time out of your very busy schedule, traveling to and from all over the world, to talk about the very important topic of life and death and afterlife and God and all the challenges that go with the struggles of a loss.
Yeah, thank you. I'm honored to be with you as always, and those are huge topics of which I'm familiar, but not an expert in many regards, but definitely have been walking through that in my life. But everybody does. That's the one thing we have in common, is loss. You know, it's remarkable. Sometimes I go to a big gathering and I've done it a few times where I've said, so how many of you have been affected by cancer? And I mean, it's almost the whole auditorium. So yeah, we know loss. So these topics are very, very significant to all of us.
They are. And it's so refreshing to me that you go into these conferences and you talk so openly about loss, because oftentimes we are not given permission to talk about the challenges after a loss in social settings. So I think that's fabulous. One of the things that I've been kind of kicking around is, and I have not come across many conversations about, is God's role and the role of the Holy Spirit in healing after a loss. When we're doing our grieving process, we hear a lot of God talk about cause and where was God when this whole loss happened, and
sure,
maybe even blaming God, anger at God, which we all need to kind of work through and work with. But what about the role of God in the healing process?
Yeah. Well, I don't think you can have a conversation about one without a conversation about the other.
Yes.
And because if God is the author of the evil, then you've got nowhere to run. And the work of the Holy Spirit in terms of a loss is essentially no different than the work of the Holy Spirit in our lives, generally speaking. And that is, I think God is in this with us, inside today's events and situations and circumstances, and is working to help us move in the direction of wholeness.
Yes.
And that means one of the names I like to refer to God as is the redeeming genius, and specifically the Holy Spirit. The Holy Spirit is a redeeming genius.
I love that term that you coined.
I like it too, and I'm sure I'm not the only one who's ever come up with it. But this is about a God who is not the author of the evil, but knows how to climb into it and get the maximum good out of it, along with our participation.
Yes.
And so, and we had mentioned this before in a conversation we had, but death and severe loss have a way of exposing us like nothing else does. Everything just stops. The world stops, and suddenly some of the deepest parts of who you are as a human being and the uniqueness of who you are comes to the surface. And the real questions arise. You can give lip service to a God who is good all the time, and then you experience a horrendous loss of one sort or another. And now it's like, okay, where do I really go? Do I trust or do I find a way to control? Because those are the only two options that I really have. And And the work of the Holy Spirit is always to move you in the direction of wholeness. And wholeness is when the way of your being matches the truth of your being. And so a lot of lies about what we think about ourselves or about life or about death have to be exposed so that we can be free to be ourselves and therefore fully of God as well. Because we're made in the image and likeness of God, which is the truth of our being. Yeah. But how is the way of our being ever going to match it? Well, we're in a world that's full of brokenness, and these all become opportunities to learn what the truth of our being is so that the way of our being can match it.